The wind cut through the streets of downtown Chicago like a knife that December morning. It was the kind of cold that made your bones ache. The kind that reminded you that winter had no mercy for anyone, especially those with nowhere to go. He stood outside the Grandview Hotel, a place so fancy that even looking at it felt like trespassing. His name was Raymond, though nobody had called him that in years. On the streets, people just called him Old Ray, or sometimes nothing at all. Most people looked right through him, like he was made of glass. Raymond was 62 years old, though he looked at least 10 years older. Life on the streets does that to a person. His beard had grown long and gray, tangled from months without proper care. His army jacket, the one thing he refused to let go of, hung loose on his shoulders. He had lost so much weight over the years that the jacket seemed to swallow him whole. But his hands. If you look closely at his hands, you would notice something different. Despite the dirt and the cracked skin from sleeping in the cold, his fingers were long and slender. They moved sometimes without him even realizing it, tapping against his leg like they were searching for something they had lost a long time ago. Through the glass doors of the hotel, Raymond could see the lobby. It was decorated for Christmas with golden lights and a tree that must have been 20 feet tall. Rich people walked around in expensive clothes, laughing and drinking champagne like the world outside did not exist, but none of that caught his attention. What caught his attention was the piano. It sat in the corner of the lobby like a sleeping giant. A beautiful black grand piano, polished so perfectly that it reflected the lights above like a mirror. Raymond had not seen a piano like that in over 30 years. Just looking at it made his chest tight with a feeling he could not name. A young man in a fancy suit sat at the piano, playing some soft jazz for the guests. He was good, Raymond thought. Technically skilled. But there was something missing in his playing. Something hollow. Like he was just going through the motions without feeling a single note. Raymond stood outside for almost an hour, watching through the glass. His feet were numb. His stomach had been empty for 2 days. But he could not move. The piano held him there like a magnet. Then the young pianist stood up and walked away, probably taking a break. The piano sat empty. Before Raymond knew what he was doing, his feet carried him toward the entrance. The automatic doors slid open, and a wave of warm air hit his face. It felt so good that for a moment, he just stood there with his eyes closed, letting the warmth wrap around him like a blanket. "Excuse me, sir. Excuse me." Raymond opened his eyes. A man in a black suit was walking toward him. His name tag said, "Front Desk Manager," and his face said, "You do not belong here. Can I help you?" The manager asked, but his tone made it clear he was not offering help. Raymond cleared his throat. His voice came out rough from not speaking much. "I was wondering, that piano over there, could I play it? Just for a few minutes." The manager's eyebrows shot up so high they nearly touched his hairline. "I'm sorry, what?" "I can play for food," Raymond said quickly. "Or coffee. Anything you got. I would really like to play." A woman nearby heard him and let out a laugh. It was not a kind laugh. It was the kind of laugh people use when they think someone is being ridiculous. She whispered something to her husband, and he laughed too. The manager's face hardened. "Sir, this is the Grandview Hotel. That instrument is a Steinway. It costs more than most houses. We cannot just let anyone walk in off the street and touch it." "I understand," Raymond said quietly. "But I know how to play. I really do. If you just give me a chance." "Security," the manager called out, not even letting him finish. 2 large men in suits started walking over from across the lobby. Raymond felt his heart sink. He should have known better. What was he thinking? A homeless man asking to play piano in a place like this. Of course they would laugh. Of course they would throw him out. But then something unexpected happened. Wait just a moment. The voice was calm, but carried authority. Everyone turned to look. An elderly woman was walking toward them. She moved slowly, using a cane, but there was nothing weak about her presence. She wore a simple blue dress and pearl earrings. Her white hair was pulled back neatly, and her eyes were sharp and clear despite her age. The manager immediately straightened up. "Mrs. Whitmore, I apologize for the disturbance. I was just handling. I can see what you were handling," she said, cutting him off. She stopped in front of Raymond and looked at him. Really looked at him. Not through him like everyone else did, but right at him. "You want to play the piano?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Raymond said. More than anything, why? The question caught him off guard. No one had asked him why he wanted anything in years. He thought about it for a moment, searching for words that felt true. "Because I used to play," he finally said. "A long time ago. Before everything went wrong. And I have not touched a piano in so long that sometimes I forget who I used to be. But when I saw that one through the window, I remembered. Just for a second, I remembered." The old woman studied his face. Then her eyes moved down to his hands. She looked at them for a long moment, and something flickered across her expression. Something like recognition. "Let him play," she said. The manager looked like he might faint. "Mrs. Whitmore, with all respect, we cannot possibly. This is my hotel," she said firmly. "My father built it. My name is on the deed. And I'm telling you to let this man play the piano." The lobby had gone completely silent. Guests were staring. Some had their phones out, probably expecting a disaster they could post online later. The woman who had laughed earlier was watching with a smug smile, waiting for the homeless man to embarrass himself. Raymond walked slowly toward the piano. His legs felt weak. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. When he reached the bench, he just stood there for a moment, afraid to sit down. Afraid that if he touched those keys, he would realize that the man he used to be was truly gone forever. But the old woman gave him a small nod. "Go ahead," her eyes seemed to say. "Show them." So Raymond sat down. The bench was smooth and solid beneath him. He placed his fingers on the keys, and the feeling that rushed through him was almost too much to bear. It was like coming home after being lost for decades. It was like finding a piece of himself that he thought had died a long time ago. The whole room was watching, waiting. Some were already smirking, ready to laugh again. Raymond closed his eyes, and he began to play. The first note hung in the air like a question. It was soft, almost shy, like Raymond was asking the piano if it still remembered him after all these years. Few people in the lobby shifted in their seats. The woman who had laughed earlier rolled her eyes and whispered to her husband. "This should be good," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. But then came the second note, and the third. And suddenly, the notes were not shy anymore. They were building into something bigger, something that filled every corner of that grand lobby. Raymond was playing Chopin. Ballade number 1 in G minor. It was one of the most difficult pieces ever written for piano. Concert pianists who had trained their whole lives approached this piece with fear. It demanded everything from you. Your skill, your emotion, your soul. And Raymond played it like he was born for it. His fingers moved across the keys with a speed and grace that seemed impossible. The music started gentle, like a story being whispered, then grew into waves of sound that crashed and swelled and took your breath away. There were moments of heartbreak in the melody, moments of hope, moments of pure raw emotion that words could never capture. The smirks disappeared from people's faces. The woman who had laughed was now frozen with her champagne glass halfway to her lips. Her husband's mouth hung open. The front desk manager stood completely still, his face pale. He looked like a man who had just realized he made a terrible mistake, but Raymond did not see any of them. His eyes were closed. He was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere far away from the cold streets and the hunger and the loneliness. He was back in a time when music was his whole world. When he had something to live for. When he was somebody, the melody shifted into the stormy middle section of the piece. Raymond's hands flew across the keyboard, hitting chords that thundered through the lobby like a winter storm. A bellhop who had been carrying luggage stopped in his tracks. A couple checking in at the front desk turned around and forgot what they were doing. Even the security guards who had been ready to throw him out were now standing there, hypnotized. One woman near the Christmas tree started crying. She did not even know why. The music just reached inside her and touched something she had kept buried for a long time. Mrs. Whitmore, the old woman who owned the hotel, had not moved from her spot. But her eyes were glistening. Her hand trembled slightly on her cane. She was watching Raymond's hands, watching the way they danced across those keys, and memories were flooding back to her. Memories from a long, long time ago. The piece built toward its climax. The notes came faster and faster, louder and louder, until it felt like the whole building was vibrating with the sound. People had stopped pretending to do anything else. Guests came out of the restaurant. Staff members gathered in doorways. Even people walking by on the street outside stopped to peer through the windows, wondering what was happening inside. Then came the final passage. The storm in the music calmed. The thunder faded into something soft and achingly beautiful. Raymond played the last notes with such tenderness that it felt like a goodbye, like he was letting go of something precious. The final chord rang out and slowly faded into silence. For a moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The lobby was completely still. Then Mrs. Whitmore began to clap. It was slow at first. Just her, alone, the sound of her old hands coming together echoing through the quiet. But then another person joined. Then another. And suddenly, the whole lobby erupted into applause. People were standing up from their chairs. The bellhop was clapping so hard his hands turned red. The woman who had laughed, the one with the pearls, was wiping tears from her cheeks and clapping along with everyone else. Even the front desk manager was applauding. Though he looked like he might be sick from shame, Raymond opened his eyes slowly, like he was waking from a dream. He looked around at all these people who had been ready to mock him just minutes ago, and he did not know what to do. He had forgotten what applause sounded like. He had forgotten what it felt like to be seen. Mrs. Whitmore walked toward the piano. The crowd parted to let her through. She moved slowly, but her eyes never left Raymond's face. When she reached him, she did not say anything at first. She just looked at him, studying every line on his weathered face, every gray hair in his tangled beard. Then she looked down at his hands again, those long, slender fingers that had just created magic out of thin air. "I knew it," she said softly. "I knew I recognized those hands." Raymond looked at her, confused. "Ma'am?" "Vienna," she said. 1987. The Music Verein. I was there. Raymond felt his heart stop. "You played this same piece," Mrs. Whitmore continued. "Chopin. Ballade number 1. I was 26 years old. My father had just passed away, and I was lost. Completely lost. I did not know how I was going to run this hotel. I did not know how I was going to live without him." She paused, her voice growing thick with emotion. "But that night, I heard you play. And something about the music, something about the way you played it, made me believe that I could survive. That I could keep going. That there was still beauty in the world, even when everything felt dark." Tears were rolling down her cheeks now, but she did not wipe them away. "I never forgot that performance," she said. "I never forgot your name. Raymond Price. They called you the poet of the piano." The name hit the air like a thunderbolt. People nearby gasped. Someone immediately pulled out their phone and started searching. "Oh my God," a young woman said, staring at her screen. Raymond Price. He was famous. He played at Carnegie Hall. He played for presidents. He was one of the greatest pianists of his generation. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. People were looking at Raymond with completely different eyes now. This was not just some homeless man. This was a legend. A ghost from another time who had somehow ended up on the streets of Chicago. Raymond sat very still on the piano bench. His hands were shaking. Nobody had called him by his full name in over 20 years. Nobody had remembered who he used to be. He had worked so hard to forget himself. "What happened to you?" Mrs. Whitmore asked gently. There was no judgment in her voice. Only compassion. Only genuine care for this broken man sitting in front of her. Raymond looked down at the piano keys. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "Life happened," he said. "I made mistakes. A lot of them. And by the time I realized how far I had fallen, I did not know how to climb back up." Mrs. Whitmore reached out and placed her hand over his. Her skin was thin and papery with age, but her grip was warm and strong. "You just did," she said. "You just climbed back up. Right here. Right now." That performance was proof that whoever you used to be is still inside you. Raymond looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. He could not speak. All the years of pain, all the loneliness, all the nights sleeping in doorways and wondering if anyone would even notice if he disappeared. It all came pouring out in those tears. The lobby was silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. Not the cold silence of judgment. This was the warm silence of people witnessing something sacred, something that reminded them what it meant to be human. Mrs. Whitmore straightened up and turned to address the crowd. "This man," she announced, her voice clear and strong, "is not leaving this hotel tonight, or any night until he is back on his feet." She looked at the front desk manager, who was practically shrinking under her gaze. "Prepare one of our suites, the best one we have, and make sure the kitchen sends up a proper meal." The manager nodded quickly and hurried off without a word. Mrs. Whitmore turned back to Raymond and smiled. "Welcome back, Mr. Price," she said. "We have a lot to talk about." That night, Raymond sat in a hotel suite, nicer than any place he had ever lived. The bed was so soft it felt like a cloud. The bathroom had towels thicker than blankets. On the table sat a meal big enough to feed him for a week, but he could not eat. He could not sleep. He just sat by the window, looking out at the city lights, thinking about everything that had led him to this moment. Mrs. Whitmore had given him space, told him to rest, said they would talk in the morning. But Raymond knew sleep would not come easy tonight. Too many memories were swimming in his head. Memories he had spent years trying to bury. He was born in Detroit in 1962. His family was poor. His father worked at an auto factory, and his mother cleaned houses for rich folks on the other side of town. They lived in a tiny apartment with thin walls and a leaky roof. Money was always tight. Dreams were a luxury they could not afford. But when Raymond was 5 years old, something happened that changed everything. His mother took him along to one of the houses she cleaned. It was a big fancy place owned by a doctor and his wife. While his mother scrubbed floors, Raymond wandered into the living room and saw it for the first time. A piano. He had never seen one up close before. It was beautiful and mysterious, like something from another world. He walked up to it and pressed a single key. The sound it made went straight to his heart. The doctor's wife found him there an hour later. He was still at the piano, picking out a melody he had heard on the radio, figuring out the notes all by himself. She could not believe what she was seeing. This little boy from the poor side of town, with no training at all, was playing music by ear. She called her husband. He called a friend who taught music at the university. Within a month, Raymond had a scholarship to study piano. Within a year, he was performing at recitals. By the time he was 10, people were calling him a prodigy, a genius, a gift from God. His parents did not understand it. They just knew their son had something special, and they did everything they could to help him grow. His father worked double shifts. His mother took on extra houses to clean. They sacrificed everything so Raymond could have lessons, so he could travel to competitions, so he could chase this dream that seemed too big for a family like theirs. And Raymond did not let them down. He won every competition he entered. He got a full scholarship to Juilliard in New York. By the time he was 22, he was playing concerts across America. By 25, he was touring Europe. Critics called him a once-in-a-generation talent. They said his playing had a soul that could not be taught. For a while, life was perfect. Raymond had everything he ever dreamed of: money, fame, standing ovations in the greatest concert halls in the world. But fame has a dark side that nobody tells you about. The pressure was constant. Every performance had to be better than the last. Every critic was watching, waiting for him to fail. He started feeling like a machine, not a person. Like all anyone cared about was what his fingers could do, not who he was inside. He started struggling to sleep. The anxiety before concerts became unbearable. He would throw up backstage, his hands shaking so badly he could barely button his shirt. Doctors gave him pills to calm his nerves. At first they helped, but then he needed more, and more, and soon he could not get through a day without them. He tried to hide it. For years, he kept performing, kept smiling for the cameras, kept pretending everything was fine. But inside, he was falling apart. Then came the night in London, 1989. He was supposed to play at Royal Albert Hall. It was the biggest concert of his career. But when he walked onto that stage and sat at the piano, his mind went completely blank. He could not remember a single note. He just sat there frozen, while thousands of people watched in silence. He walked off the stage without playing a single song. After that, the invitations stopped coming. The phone stopped ringing. The same people who had praised him now whispered behind his back. Washed up, burned out. Such a shame. Raymond hit rock bottom. He lost his apartment. He lost his friends. He lost himself. Then one night, drunk and alone in a bus station, he saw a poster for the United States Army. Something about it called to him. Maybe it was the promise of structure. Maybe it was a chance to disappear. Maybe he just wanted to become someone else entirely. He enlisted the next day. He was 32 years old. The Army did not care that he had played at Carnegie Hall. It did not care about his reviews in the New York Times. He was just another soldier, another body. And in a strange way, that was exactly what he needed. For the first time in years, nobody expected him to be special. He could just exist. He served 2 tours overseas. He saw things no person should ever have to see. He lost friends. He earned medals he never wanted. He came home with scars on his body and deeper ones in his mind. The nightmares started soon after he got back. He would wake up screaming, covered in sweat, unable to remember where he was. Loud noises made him drop to the ground. Crowds made him panic. He tried to get help, but the system was broken. Long wait times, overworked doctors, forms and paperwork that never seemed to end. He fell through the cracks. His parents had passed away while he was overseas. He had no wife, no children, no family left. The few friends from his old music life had moved on without him. He was completely alone. He got a small apartment at first, living off his military pension. But the nightmares got worse. He stopped leaving the house. He stopped paying bills. Eventually, he stopped caring about anything at all. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday. He packed what little he had into a duffel bag and walked out into the street with nowhere to go. That was 15 years ago. 15 years of sleeping under bridges and in shelters. 15 years of being invisible. 15 years of watching people walk past him like he was not even there. And in all that time, he never touched a piano. He could not bring himself to do it. The piano was connected to everything he had lost. Every failure. Every broken dream. Playing again felt like it would hurt too much. But then he saw the Steinway through the hotel window, and something deep inside him woke up. Something that had been sleeping for 3 decades thought now here he was. Clean sheets. Warm room. His name spoken out loud for the first time in 20 years. Raymond looked at his reflection in the window. An old man looked back at him. Gray beard. Hollow cheeks. Eyes that had seen too much pain. But his hands were still the same. Long fingers. Strong knuckles. The hands of a pianist thought maybe Mrs. Whitmore was right. Maybe the person he used to be was still in there somewhere. Maybe it was not too late. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. He walked over and opened it. Mrs. Whitmore stood there with a gentle smile. Behind her was a young woman holding a camera and a notepad. "I hope I am not disturbing you," Mrs. Whitmore said. "But there is someone who would like to hear your story. The whole story. If you are ready to tell it." Raymond looked at the young woman, then back at Mrs. Whitmore. For 15 years, he had hidden from the world. He had been ashamed of what he had become. He had believed that his story was over. But maybe, just maybe, it was only beginning. He stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said. "I am ready." The young journalist's name was Christine. She worked for a small online news outlet that nobody had really heard of. She had been at the hotel that evening to cover a charity gala when she heard the commotion in the lobby. Like everyone else, she had watched Raymond play. Like everyone else, she had been moved to tears. But unlike everyone else, she knew a story when she saw one. She sat across from Raymond in his hotel suite, a recorder on the table between them. For 3 hours, he talked. He told her everything. The childhood in Detroit. The sacrifices his parents made. The rise to fame and the crushing fall. The army. The war. The streets. It was the first time he had told anyone the full truth in over 20 years. When he finished, Christine sat in silence for a long moment. Her eyes were red. She had stopped taking notes halfway through because her hands were shaking too much to write. "Mr. Price," she finally said, "would you be willing to play the piano again? On camera? So people can see what I saw tonight?" Raymond hesitated. Part of him wanted to say no. Part of him wanted to crawl back into the shadows where he had hidden for so long. But another part, a part that was slowly waking up after years of sleep, wanted the world to know he was still alive. "Yes," he said quietly, "I will play." The next morning, they went down to the lobby. The hotel staff had set everything up. The Steinway was polished and waiting. A small crowd had gathered, word having spread about what happened the night before. Raymond sat at the piano. Christine positioned her camera. And he played. This time, he chose something different. He played a piece he had written himself, decades ago, when he was young and full of hope. He had never performed it publicly. It was too personal, too close to his heart. But now, sitting in that lobby with the morning light streaming through the windows, it felt like the right time. The music was beautiful and sad and hopeful all at once. It told the story of a boy who dreamed too big and flew too high and crashed too hard. But it also told the story of getting back up, of finding light in the darkness, of never giving up, even when the world has given up on you. When he finished, there was not a dry eye in the room. Christine posted the video that afternoon. She wrote a simple headline: "Homeless veteran asked to play piano for food. What happens next will break your heart." Within an hour, the video had 10,000 views. By evening, It had 100,000. By the next morning, it had crossed 5 million. Raymond Price was trending on every social media platform. News networks picked up the story. Headlines appeared all over the world. Lost piano legend found on Chicago streets. The tragic fall and miraculous return of Raymond Price. From Carnegie Hall to homelessness, one veteran's incredible journey. The response was overwhelming. Emails poured into the hotel by the thousands. Letters arrived by the bagful. People from all over the world wanted to share how the video had touched them. Some were musicians who had grown up listening to Raymond's recordings. Some were veterans who understood his struggle. Some were ordinary people who had faced their own dark times and found hope in his story. A crowdfunding page was set up by someone Raymond had never met. Within 3 days, it raised over $2 million. People donated $5, $10, sometimes thousands. They left messages saying things like, "Thank you for reminding me that it is never too late," and "Your music saved me when I was at my lowest." Raymond could not believe it. He had spent 15 years thinking nobody cared, thinking he had been forgotten, thinking his life did not matter to anyone. And now millions of strangers were telling him he mattered, that his music mattered, that his story mattered. But the most unexpected messages came from people who actually knew him. One afternoon, Mrs. Whitmore knocked on his door with a strange look on her face. "You have visitors," she said. Raymond followed her down to the lobby. Standing, there was a group of people he had not seen in over 30 years. Former students, young pianists he had mentored back when he was at the height of his career. They were not young anymore. They had gray hair and wrinkles and lives of their own. But he recognized them immediately. One of them, a man who was now a professor at a famous music conservatory, stepped forward with tears in his eyes. "We thought you were dead," he said, his voice breaking. "We looked for you. For years we looked. But you just vanished. We never stopped wondering what happened to you." Raymond could not speak. He just stood there as one by one, his former students came up and embraced him. These were people who had gone on to have successful careers because of what he taught them. Concert pianists, composers, music teachers. They had built their lives on the foundation he had given them, and they had never forgotten. The music world began to respond as well. The director of Carnegie Hall released a statement calling Raymond one of the greatest pianists of the 20th century. Famous musicians posted tributes on social media. Old recordings of his performances resurfaced online, and a new generation discovered his genius for the first time. But not everyone was celebrating. Some critics pointed out the failures of the system that had let Raymond fall so far. How could a decorated veteran end up homeless? How could a national treasure slip through the cracks? The story sparked conversations about mental health, about veteran care, about how society treats its most vulnerable. Raymond watched all of this unfold from his hotel suite, feeling like he was watching a movie about someone else's life. It was too much to process, too much to take in. For so long, he had been invisible. Now suddenly the whole world was looking at him. One evening, Mrs. Whitmore came to visit him. She found him sitting by the window, staring out at the city with a troubled look on his face. "You seem overwhelmed," she said gently, taking a seat beside him. "I am," Raymond admitted. "All these people, all this attention. I do not know what to do with it. I do not deserve any of this." Mrs. Whitmore shook her head firmly. "That is not true. You deserve every bit of it. You have a gift, Raymond. A rare and beautiful gift. The fact that you lost your way for a while does not change that. But what am I supposed to do now?" he asked. "Go back to performing? I am 62 years old. I have been living on the streets. I cannot just pick up where I left off." Mrs. Whitmore smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. Who said anything about picking up where you left off? Maybe this is a chance to do something completely new. Something that matters even more than concerts and fame. Raymond looked at her, confused. Like what? She reached into her pocket and pulled out a photograph. It showed a group of young people in military uniforms standing in front of a VA hospital. I have been doing some research, she said. Do you know how many veterans are homeless in this country? Do you know how many of them struggle with the same things you struggle with? They come home from war and nobody knows how to help them. They fall through the cracks, just like you did. Raymond took the photograph and studied it. The faces of those young veterans looked back at him. Some of them had the same hollow look in their eyes that he had seen in his own reflection for years. What if your story could help them? Mrs. Whitmore continued. What if your music could give them the same thing it gave me all those years ago in Vienna? Hope, a reason to keep going. Raymond sat quietly for a long moment. The wheels in his mind were turning. For the first time in decades, he was not thinking about his own pain. He was thinking about others who were suffering the same way he had suffered. You really think I could make a difference? He asked. Mrs. Whitmore placed her hand on his shoulder. I think you already have, she said. Now imagine what you could do if you really tried. That night, Raymond did not sleep. But it was not because of nightmares. It was because he was planning, thinking, dreaming again for the first time in 30 years. By morning, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. 6 months later, the Grandview Hotel looked different. The lobby was still elegant, still beautiful, still filled with wealthy guests drinking champagne. But now there was something new. A large banner hung above the entrance that read, Keys of Hope, Music for Heroes. It was the name Raymond had chosen for the program he built from nothing. The idea was simple. Take homeless veterans, people who had fallen through the cracks just like he had, and give them something to hold on to. Give them music. Not to turn them into concert pianists, but to give them a reason to wake up in the morning. A purpose. A community. A second chance. Mrs. Whitmore had donated an entire floor of the hotel to house the program. She converted old conference rooms into practice spaces filled with donated instruments, pianos, guitars, drums, violins, whatever people needed. She found a way to get it. Raymond used the money from the crowdfunding campaign to hire teachers, therapists, and counselors. He partnered with VA hospitals and homeless shelters across Chicago. He personally visited the streets where he used to sleep, talking to veterans who were still out there, still invisible, still waiting for someone to see them. Some of them recognized him from the viral video. Others had no idea who he was. It did not matter. Raymond sat with them on cold sidewalks and park benches. He listened to their stories. He told them his own. And he invited them to come try something new. Not everyone said yes. Some were too broken to believe that anything could help. Some had given up hope a long time ago. Raymond understood. He had been there himself, but some of them said yes. And that was enough. The first class had 12 veterans. They ranged in age from 28 to 71. Some had served in recent wars. Some had served decades ago. All of them carried wounds that no one could see. Raymond remembered the first day clearly. These 12 men and women sat in a circle, looking uncomfortable and skeptical. Most of them had never touched an instrument in their lives. They did not understand why they were there or what good music could possibly do. Raymond did not give them a speech. He did not try to convince them of anything. He just sat down at the piano and played. He played something soft and simple, a melody that sounded like a conversation. Then he stopped and looked at them. Music saved my life, he said quietly. I am not saying it will save yours, but I am asking you to give it a chance. Just try. That is all I am asking. One by one, they picked up instruments. The sounds they made were clumsy and awkward at first. Wrong notes everywhere. Rhythms that made no sense. But Raymond just smiled and encouraged them to keep going. "Nobody gets it right the first time," he told them. "Nobody gets it right the 100th time either. That is not the point. The point is to feel something, to create something, to know that you are still alive and you still have something to offer this world." Weeks passed, then months, and slowly something incredible started to happen. The veterans began to change. A man who had not spoken more than 5 words in years started opening up during group sessions. A woman who suffered from terrible nightmares said that practicing guitar gave her something to focus on besides the darkness in her head. An older veteran who had lost both legs in combat discovered he had a gift for drums and started smiling for the first time in decades. They were not becoming professional musicians. That was never the goal. They were becoming themselves again, finding pieces of who they used to be before the war took those pieces away. Raymond watched this transformation with a full heart. Every success story reminded him why he was put on this earth. It was never about the fame or the concert halls or the standing ovations. It was about this: connection, healing, helping others find their way back from the darkness. The program grew faster than anyone expected. News spread. More veterans came. More donations poured in. Other cities reached out, asking how to start their own Keys of Hope chapters. Within a year, there were programs in 10 cities across America. Within 2 years, there were programs in 3 different countries. Raymond traveled to as many as he could, meeting veterans, sharing his story, playing piano in VA hospitals and community centers and homeless shelters. He was busier than he had ever been in his life, but it was a different kind of busy, a fulfilling kind, the kind that made him excited to wake up every morning. One evening, about 2 years after that first day at the hotel, Raymond returned to the Grandview for a special event. It was the annual Keys of Hope benefit concert, a fundraiser that brought together everyone who had been part of the journey. The lobby was packed. Donors in fancy clothes mingled with veterans in jeans and t-shirts. Former students now performed as headliners. Local news cameras captured every moment. Raymond stood backstage, peeking through the curtain at the crowd. His heart was full, but also nervous. Public events still made him anxious. Some things never fully go away. A hand touched his shoulder. He turned to see Mrs. Whitmore, now 84 years old, but still as sharp as ever. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Grateful," Raymond said, "and a little scared." She laughed softly. "Good. That means you are still human." They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the crowd. "Do you know what I see out there?" Mrs. Whitmore said. "I see lives that have been changed. I see people who were written off by the world, and now they are standing tall again. You did that, Raymond. You gave them hope." Raymond shook his head. "I just opened the door. They walked through it themselves." "That is exactly what makes you special," she said. "You never wanted the credit. You just wanted to help." Before Raymond could respond, someone called his name. It was time. He walked onto the stage to thunderous applause. The same lobby where people had laughed at him 2 years ago was now filled with people cheering for him. He spotted some familiar faces in the crowd. The front desk manager who had tried to throw him out was there. He had quit his job at the hotel and now worked full-time for Keys of Hope, helping coordinate housing for veterans in the program. The woman who had laughed at him, the one with the pearls, was there too. She had become one of the program's biggest donors after reading about Raymond's story. She caught his eye and nodded with a small, humble smile. A silent apology and a show of respect. Christine, the journalist who had filmed his first video, was in the front row. Her little story had launched her career, and now she worked for a major network. but she still came to every Keys of Hope event. She said Riman's story changed her life. And scattered throughout the audience were dozens of veterans from the program. Some were performing tonight. Others were just there to support. All of them were standing proof that it was never too late to start over. Raymond sat at the piano. The same Steinway where everything began. He looked out at the crowd and spoke into the microphone. 2 years ago, I walked into this hotel with nothing. No home, no hope. No reason to believe that my life was worth anything anymore. But someone gave me a chance. She let me play when everyone else wanted to throw me out. And that one chance changed everything. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. I am not special. I'm just a man who fell down and somehow found a way to get back up. And if I can do it, so can you. So can anyone. All it takes is one person willing to say yes. One open door. One moment of grace. He turned to the piano and placed his fingers on the keys. This song is for everyone who has ever felt invisible. Everyone who has been told they do not matter. Everyone who is still fighting to find their way home. You matter. Your story matters. And it is never too late to begin again. He closed his eyes and began to play. The music filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. It was beautiful and broken and hopeful all at once. It was the sound of a man who had lost everything and found something even greater on the other side. And somewhere in the audience, a young veteran wiped tears from his eyes and thought to himself, maybe I can do this too. Maybe it is not too late for me either.